There are hundreds of thousands of textual differences in the New Testament manuscripts, more differences than the total number of words in the book itself. So the real question is not whether the Bible has variations. The real question is, how did they get there? Is the Bible full of contradictions? In our previous episode, we discussed a common idea, that the New Testament is the most well-documented book from the ancient world, with more than 5,800 Greek manuscripts. But today, we face a more complicated reality. Having thousands of copies does not automatically make the text clearer. In fact, it reveals just how complex the manuscript tradition really is. In short, the manuscript evidence shows that the New Testament contains between 300,000 and 400,000 textual variations across surviving copies, something we explored in earlier episodes. But this raises a deeper question that we have not yet examined. Do any of these variations affect important passages? And how confident can we be that the text we read today reflects the earliest form of the message? Let's take a closer look. When we examine the most important event in the Christian story, the resurrection, we notice something interesting. The four Gospels describe the empty tomb, but not always in the same way. Who went to the tomb? Was it Mary Magdalene alone, or several women together? And who did they encounter there? A young man, one angel, or two? These differences may not destroy the overall narrative, but they reveal something important. The Gospel accounts were preserved through a living textual tradition, copied, transmitted, and passed down over many decades. This raises an important historical question. If these texts ultimately trace back to eyewitness memories, why do the written traditions show such variation in the details? Are we reading the direct reports of witnesses, or the remembered traditions of communities reflecting on events long after they occurred? At this point, another question emerges. Were the books of the New Testament actually written by the original disciples? Or did the text undergo changes over time that produced some of the differences we see today? Textual critics point out that some passages appear to have been added later, sometimes to reinforce developing theological ideas. One famous example is the passage often used in discussions about the Trinity, the Johannine Comma, 1 John 5:7. This line is absent from every known Greek manuscript before the 14th century. It appears to be a later Latin addition that eventually entered some Bible translations. This is significant because it is one of the clearest passages explicitly describing the Trinity, while other references remain open to interpretation. But this is not the only example. Another well-known case is the longer ending of the Gospel of Mark, Mark 16:9-20. This section contains the story of Jesus appearing after the resurrection and commissioning his disciples. The problem is that the earliest and most reliable manuscripts, such as the Codex Sinaiticus and Codex Vaticanus, end the Gospel at verse 8 with the words, "For they were afraid." This means that the earliest form of the earliest Gospel may not have included the later resurrection appearances or the ascension narrative. Many scholars believe the longer ending was added later in order to complete the story and harmonize it with the other Gospels. Some textual critics, including scholars like Bart Ehrman, argue that this reflects a period when the text was still fluid and developing within the early Christian communities. But this is not the whole story. There is another factor that is often overlooked. The books that eventually became the New Testament were not the only Christian writings circulating in the early centuries. Other texts also existed, such as the Gospel of Thomas and the Gospel of Mary. These writings were discovered centuries later among ancient manuscripts. Today, they are known as the Apocryphal Gospels texts that did not become part of the official biblical canon. Historians still debate when many of these writings were composed and how widely they were used. But their existence reminds us of an important historical reality. Early Christianity was not a single unified voice. It was a diverse movement with multiple interpretations, texts, and traditions. Over time, certain writings were accepted as authoritative, while others were excluded. The canon that exists today is the result of that long historical process. In the end, we are not here to judge a book or a belief. We are here to think freely, something that many people avoid. With this episode, our discussion about the Bible will pause for now. In the next stage of this journey, we will move to a new topic, one that challenges the way our minds think, a topic that invites us to question, explore, and reflect more deeply. And I would love to hear your suggestions about what subjects we should explore next. See you, son.